You're at your sister's house on a Tuesday afternoon, a random Tuesday, the kind of day most adults spend somewhere behind a desk, and you're the one who picked up your niece from school because your sister asked, almost apologetically, if you had anything going on today. The specific phrasing people use when they've already assumed the answer is no. You didn't. Not in the way she meant it. You spent the morning reviewing your portfolio's rebalancing for the quarter, a task that took 40 minutes, and the rest of the time reading, actually reading, a book you've been meaning to finish for a year, on your own porch, in your own silence, because you haven't needed to be anywhere at a specific hour in 4 years. Your niece chatters the whole ride home about a science project, and you drop her off, and your sister meets you at the door with a look you've come to recognize over the years, a specific blend of gratitude and something else underneath it, something closer to worry. "Thanks for doing this," she says. "I know you've got the time." She means it kindly. She also means it the way people mean things when they've quietly filed you under a category you never agreed to. $6.2 million in liquid assets, another $4 million in real estate you don't actively manage, structured specifically, years ago, to require almost nothing from you on a weekly basis. You retired, functionally, at 39, 11 years after selling a small software company most of your family still can't quite explain to their friends. You have never once, not to your sister, not to your parents, not to anyone at a holiday table, said the actual number out loud. Your sister thinks you're unemployed. Not cruelly. Not even consciously, most of the time. Just quietly, in the specific, low-grade way people categorize a sibling who doesn't leave for an office every morning, in a family that's never had anyone in it who didn't need to. The gap between financially free and unemployed isn't in the bank account. It's entirely in the story other people need to tell themselves to make sense of a life that doesn't look like theirs. This is the part almost nobody explains honestly before you live it. Being done with work, genuinely done, permanently and by choice, reads to almost everyone who loves you exactly like being stuck, and there is almost no way to correct the impression without changing the entire relationship in the process. You didn't plan for this specific misunderstanding. You just built a life, over years, designed around not needing anyone's permission or understanding to be happy in it, and the misunderstanding arrived as a side effect nobody warned you about. Your father, 71 now, worked the same manufacturing job for 31 years, the kind of man for whom having a job and being a person of worth were never separate concepts, wired together so completely in his mind that unwinding them wasn't a conversation he was ever going to have the vocabulary for. At a family dinner 2 years into your retirement, he asks you, not unkindly, whether you've thought about getting back into something. The specific gentle prodding fathers do when they're worried without quite knowing how to name the worry. You tell him you're doing consulting work, a half-truth you've refined over the years into something that satisfies without inviting further questions, technically accurate, since you do occasionally advise a friend's startup for free, dressed up in language vague enough to sound like employment without actually claiming to be any. He nods, relieved, the way people are relieved when a story finally has a shape they recognize, and the conversation moves on to something else. You learn early that the family doesn't actually need the truth. They need a story with a familiar shape, and you can either spend years trying to replace their shape with the real one, or you can hand them a shape close enough to satisfy the worry, and keep the real story for yourself. You've chosen the second option for years now, not out of shame, but out of a specific, hard-won understanding that the real story would cost you more in family friction than it would ever gain you in being fully understood. Your brother-in-law, Desmond, is the one who actually says the quiet part out loud, at a 4th of July barbecue, 3 beers in the specific tone men use when they think they're being helpful rather than pointed. "You gotta get back out there, man," he says, clapping you on the shoulder near the cooler, gesturing vaguely at nothing in particular, meaning your life, meaning the entire shape of your days. "I know the tech thing didn't work out how you wanted, but there's no shame in starting over. Everybody's hiring right now." You let this sit for a second, the specific factual inaccuracy of it. The tech thing worked out exactly as well as you'd hoped, better even, which is the entire reason you're standing at this barbecue instead of in an office, and you consider, for a moment, correcting him, laying out the actual sequence of events, the acquisition, the number, the 11 years of runway it bought you. You don't. You say something vague about taking your time, finding the right fit, and he nods, satisfied, the same relieved nod your father gives, and goes back to his burger. People will construct an entire narrative about your life out of the one detail they can actually see, that you're not at an office, and they will defend that narrative more fiercely than you'd ever defend the truth, because their version comes with an explanation that makes sense to them, and yours, the real one, doesn't fit anywhere in their existing categories at all. You watch Desmond repeat a version of this story to your uncle later that same afternoon, secondhand now, slightly exaggerated. Still finding his footing after the tech thing. And you understand, watching the story spread 2 people deep without your input, that correcting it now would require correcting an entire family's collective understanding of you, built and reinforced over years, and you're not sure the correction is worth what it would cost. The cost of staying quiet reveals itself slowly, in specific moments you don't expect, the way most costs like this do. Your mother calls one evening, worried in the way mothers get worried, about a cousin's wedding coming up, the specific financial strain of travel and a gift and a hotel room, and she offers, gently, almost apologetically, to help cover your portion. Since things have been tight. You sit with the phone against your ear for a long moment, genuinely unsure how to respond, because things have never once been tight, not for years, and the offer, kind as it is, lands somewhere strange in your chest, grateful for the love behind it, quietly wounded by what it reveals about how thin your mother believes the ground beneath you actually is. You tell her you're fine, you've got it covered, and she insists, the way mothers insist, and you finally have to be firmer than you'd like, an edge creeping into your voice that surprises you both, and she goes quiet, hurt in a different way now, confused about why her son snapped at a simple offer of help. You don't explain. You never fully explain, and hanging up that night, you understand something you hadn't quite let yourself see before. The silence you've been keeping to protect the relationship from awkwardness has started, instead, to introduce a different, quieter kind of damage, small moments of hurt on both sides, hers from confusion, yours from being cared for in a way that assumes a version of your life that stopped being true a decade ago. Protecting people from a truth they might struggle with sometimes just delays the discomfort. It doesn't remove it. It just changes what shape the discomfort eventually takes, and who ends up carrying it. The turning point, the one that actually forces the question, happens with your niece, 16 now, the same one you used to pick up from school, sharper now, old enough to notice things her parents have stopped questioning. She's doing a school project on career paths, interviewing family members about their jobs, and she comes to you last, almost as an afterthought, and asks, with the specific bluntness teenagers sometimes have that adults have trained themselves out of, "What do you actually do all day? Like, for real? Mom always says you're between things, but it's been like 5 years." You look at her for a long moment, this kid you've watched grow up across a decade of family dinners where you've deflected some version of this exact question 100 times, and you understand, looking at her genuine curiosity rather than her mother's worry or her grandfather's disappointment, that you finally have a question worth actually answering honestly. You tell her. Not the exact number, not yet, she's 16 and some things still deserve a slower reveal, but the real shape of it, that you built a company, that you sold it, that the money from the sale was structured so you'd never have to work again if you didn't want to, and that, between things, was never actually true. It was just a story that let everyone else feel comfortable, including you, most days. She's quiet for a moment, processing this the way teenagers process things, somewhere between impressed and confused. "So you're like retired? At your age? Financially free?" You tell her, correcting the word gently, not out of vanity but because the distinction actually matters to you. "Retired means you're done. I'm not done with anything. I just don't have to do any of it for money anymore." The first person who ever asks the honest question directly gets the honest answer, and it's almost never the person you expected it to be. It's the one who was curious instead of worried, which turns out to be an entirely different kind of listening. You don't tell the rest of the family right away. The conversation with your niece sits with you for months before you decide what, if anything, to do with the rest of them, and the decision, when it comes, arrives at your father's 72nd birthday, of all places, a quiet dinner instead of a big party, just the immediate family around a table that's held every major conversation your family has ever had. Your father asks the same version of the same question he's asked for years, softer this time, more resigned. "Any updates on the job front?" And you look at him, and at your sister, and at Desmond down the end of the table, still holding on to his. Still finding his footing. Story 2 years after inventing it, and you decide, finally, that the cost of the silence has outlasted whatever protection it was originally buying. You tell them the real shape of it, not the exact number, because some things are still yours alone to hold, but enough, the sale, the structure, the 11 years and counting of not needing anyone's job description to apply to your own life. Your father is quiet for a long time, the specific quiet of a man recalculating 3 decades of a story he built about his own son, and then he says something you didn't expect, something that tells you he understood more than you gave him credit for. I always wondered why you never seemed worried, he says. I just thought you were better at hiding it than the rest of us. Sometimes the people closest to you aren't confused because they can't see the truth. They're confused because the only story they've ever had access to didn't have room in it for a version of not working that wasn't also a version of struggling, and nobody had ever shown them the third option existed. You're at your sister's house again, months later, another random Tuesday, picking up your niece from school the same way you always have, and this time, when your sister meets you at the door, the look she gives you has changed, the worry mostly gone, replaced by something that took her, honestly, a while to arrive at, but arrived at genuinely, a kind of easy respect that doesn't need to ask anymore what you've got going on. Thanks for doing this, she says, same words as always, but the weight behind them different now, no longer the gratitude of someone covering for a struggling brother, just the plain gratitude of a sister asking a favor of another adult who happens to have the time. You drive home that evening the long way, past the porch where you've spent 4 years of Tuesday mornings reading books you actually wanted to finish, and you think about how long you carried a story that wasn't true, just to spare people a discomfort that, in the end, cost everyone more to maintain than it would have cost to simply say, plainly, years earlier, I'm not unemployed. I'm done needing permission from anyone's story about what a life is supposed to look like, including, for a long time, my own.